I'm gonna sing, I'm gonna shout, I'm gonna let the reason out that his love goes on forever. I'm gonna take it all the way, I'm gonna praise you.
When it comes to life, what kind of skills do you have? Hi, I'm Pastor Bill with your Maple Minute for Thursday, February the 25th, 2021. Did you know that the Hebrew word for wisdom has a root meaning of skill? That means that wisdom really is the skill to live according to God's power, and that's really what it is. See, in the last Maple Minute, we covered the fact that wisdom gives us perspective on how to live our lives, but today we want to see that Solomon tells us that wisdom gives us the power to get through. In fact, he gives us 4 areas of life which wisdom provides us power with, and we just want to cover them real quick as we look through the end of Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verses 19 through 29. In the first area, he tells us that wisdom, this power of wisdom, it gives us wisdom to deal with the problems we encounter. You know, in verses 19 and 20, he says, wisdom gives strength to the wise man more than 10 rulers who are in a city. And that's so important that we understand that. He says, surely there is not a righteous man on earth who does good and never sins. And what he's telling us here is that there are problems, really, same thing that one of Job's friends pointed out to him, that man's born to problems as the sparks fly upward, talking about that fire, and you've seen fires that crackle and all that. But I think the best way to illustrate this is looking into one of my favorite stories to talk about. 3 young Hebrew men faced a problem of their life, and really it was a life problem because it was a life or death problem. 3 guys named Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael, or we know them better as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They were in a situation where they were told by King Nebuchadnezzar that they had to bow down and worship this golden image he'd put up. Of course, that was not going to happen because they were followers of God, and they knew that was idolatry, and they couldn't do it. And so they stood on their principles. And here we find in Daniel chapter 3, they're called before Nebuchadnezzar, and he's trying to give them a graceful way out, like, oh, you didn't know? So that he tells them, like, in case you didn't know, you're going to have to do this thing, so you might as well do it. And listen to their answer as they say this, "O Nebuchadnezzar," notice how polite they are, "we have no need to answer you in this matter." That means we don't have to stop and think and pray about it. You know, there are some things that are just obvious. See, if this be so, our God, and that means if we get thrown into this fiery furnace, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fire first. God has power, and they know that. And he will, notice how definite they are, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, even if he doesn't deliver us, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. And with that, Nebuchadnezzar gets so enraged that he tells them, heat the furnace up 7 times hotter than it's ever been heated up. And they cast them in, and what happens? You know the rest of the story. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they make it out because God's power. See, when they were faced with the biggest problem of their life, they had to rely on the power that wisdom gave them. And that's what we find that Solomon's telling us here. Wisdom is better than 10 rulers of a city. It gives us more power, more strength. And if we can take God's wisdom, it'll give us more ability than any ruler, any king, anybody in charge. And that's the truth. The second area that we find Solomon pointing out is wisdom to deal with the people we employ. You see, we have this issue sometimes with relationships. And in verses 21 and 22, he tells us, don't take heart to all the things that people say. And that's great advice. Why? Lest you hear your servant cursing you, your fellow worker, the person who works under you, maybe even your boss. Because your heart knows that many times you yourself have cursed others. And that's really a smack in our face, because what he's saying here is he's saying, hey, listen, don't take it to heart what people say about you, the gossip people say about you. And he gives you a sort of a different take. Now, remember, he's not speaking with God in his life at this point, but he says, you probably have done it to other people, so don't get so upset when you hear somebody do it to you, because you probably done it to somebody else. And what he's really trying to empower us to understand is that wisdom helps us understand how we go through the difficult relationships, the different problems in life. The third area he talks about is wisdom to deal with the perplexities we experience. In verses 23 through 25, he talks about some of these, not just problems, but they are perplexities. He says, all this I have tested by wisdom. I say I will be wise, but it was far from me. And there again, this is advice coming from the guy we consider to be the wisest man to have ever lived. He says, that which has been far off and deep, very deep, who can find it out? I turn my heart to know and to seek out and to seek wisdom and the scheme of things, and to know the wickedness of folly and the foolishness that is madness. And you know what? What he comes to this conclusion really is that the only way that he can make it through life is through wisdom, because wisdom helps us to deal with the perplexities we experience. See, wisdom gives you the power to live with things that you don't understand. I don't understand COVID. I don't understand cancer. I don't understand why people die at early ages. I don't understand the struggles, why evil men get to do good things and why good men don't get to do good things. I don't understand a lot of the things that bother me. But the power of wisdom provides its release from the things that are way too complex, the things that really only God understands. See, I think we have to remind ourselves that we don't understand the way God is. We don't know how things work. And God, sometimes he lets things happen. I don't understand why our government is the way it is. I don't understand the results of elections. I don't understand how people can look at things and see them the way they do in this day and age. I don't understand why people go out and drink alcohol to relieve their problems. I don't understand why people get addicted to drugs. I don't understand a lot of things. I don't even understand sometimes the things that I face in a day. But you know what? I can live with power in my life when I release those things to God, because God will handle those things. See, wisdom gives us the power to live out our lives in the present and leave the unknown future in God's hands. And that's the power that Solomon's talking about. The fourth area and final area that Solomon talks about in chapter 7, verses 26 through 29, is the wisdom to deal with the pitfalls we escape. You know, he says, and I find something more bitter than death, the woman whose heart is snares and nets, and whose hands are fetters, he who pleases God escapes her, but the sinner is taken by her. Behold, this is what I found, says the preacher, while adding one thing to another to find the scheme of things, which my soul has sought repeatedly, but I have found nothing. But a woman among all these I have not found. See, this alone I have found, that God made man upright. God made us, and you know he did. He made us not to be evil. He made his man upright. But here's the problem. They have sought out many schemes. You know, those are the pitfalls of life. And he gives us the easiest pitfall to see, because it was the pitfall he warned about over in the book of Proverbs. He's talking here about a woman who seduces someone. It reminds me of the story that you find over in I think it's Proverbs 6 or 7, where he tells the story, I think it's Proverbs actually 7, where he warns about the story about the foolish young man who's sought out by the adulterous woman, and he gets snared into that trap that leaves him so damaged in life. And that's just a warning Solomon was given to his young, he was given by David, and now he's giving it to his young heirs. And you know what? Solomon really is trying to help us here see in life there are going to be pitfalls. And we need wisdom to deal with those problems that are going to come up, the pitfalls of life. You know, there are so many traps out there. One of the things that scared me about having kids as my wife and I got married, was the fact that I knew my kids probably wouldn't be able to handle all the issues of life, especially if they don't give their whole heart and mind to God. And that's what we find in our lives. If we're not careful, we will fall into the pitfalls of life. And yet, here's the truth. Wisdom helps us deal with those pitfalls, is what Solomon. He says, God made us, and that's what he says there. God made us upright, but we tend to touch into things that we shouldn't touch into, get into addictions and problems. But here, let me give you what Paul said. Paul said over in Colossians chapter 2, verse 3, he says, in whom, and I added the word Christ just so you can see that, he's just so you know who we're talking about, in whom, that is, in Christ, are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. You know, when you're facing the difficult issues and perplexities and pitfalls that you don't know how to deal with things, you know what you need to remember? You need to remember that you know Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ, according to this, is the treasure of wisdom and knowledge. He is God's wisdom in human flesh. And we have a relationship with him. So as we face these problems, don't let the problems we encounter, the people we're around, the perplexities we experience, or the pitfalls that tend to come upon us in life, don't let them get you discouraged and destroyed. Let wisdom give you the power to win out in this battle of life. And then take that wisdom and help share it with those who are captive. Other people who don't know Jesus Christ, they are just captives that are being forced to work under the bondage of sin. We need to help set them free, and the way we set them free is through the wisdom of God, that is Jesus Christ, in their lives. So this week, look to share some wisdom on how to do life better with someone who may not understand who Jesus Christ is. You don't have to preach a message, just tell them the truth, and the truth will set them free. That's what Jesus said.
His name up high, 'cause his love goes on forever.